corporations, and one of them, you won't be surprised to hear, is slowing down. But I want to pose this question again, but this time refer to something else. Why have we allowed this critical human activity to get outsourced to corporations when the activity I'm talking about is investing? And while there are obvious differences between starting a stew pot and managing a portfolio, it seems to me that the direction of Colin's thinking is worth following. If we outsource investing, that is, if we give all our money to others whom we don't know very well, in whose hands it becomes other people's money. How many people here have heard that phrase, other people's money? Not that many, a few. OPM, it's actually has initials, other people's money. That's what they call our money on Wall Street. That's one of the many reasons it becomes so easy for them to play with it. When we give all our money to others, then we are at risk of ending up with nothing more than other people's financial stew. Or should we call it other people's financial broth? You know, the kind of broth that is spoiled by too many cooks. It just so happens that on the same NPR program that featured Michael Pollan last week, there was also an author named David Rode, who has written a book called Beyond War, Reimagining American Influence in the New Middle East. He was asked about the keys to improving our foreign policy, and his answer was, the single best thing we can do is slow down and listen. An amazing comment. So, on that morning, last week in NPR, all roads led to slow. Cooking is slow. Listening is slow. So let's listen to the opening of Michael Pollan's Cooked. At a certain point in the late middle of my life, I made the unexpected but happy discovery that the answer to several of the questions that most occupied me was in fact one and the same. Cook. Some of these questions were personal. For example, what was the single most important thing we could do as a family to improve our health and general well-being? And what would be a good way to better connect to my teenage son? Other questions were slightly more political in nature. For years, I've been trying to determine what is the most important thing an ordinary person can do to help reform the American food system, to make it healthier and more sustainable. Another related question is, how can people living in a highly specialized consumer economy reduce their sense of dependence and achieve a greater degree of self-sufficiency? And then there were the more philosophical questions. How in our everyday lives can we acquire a deeper understanding of the natural world and our species' peculiar role in it? You can always go to the woods to confront such questions, but I discovered, this is Michael Pollan, that even more interesting answers could be had simply by going to the kitchen. Pretty amazing. And that's the introduction to his book. When he says that even more interesting answers can be found simply by going to the kitchen, you won't be surprised that I immediately think even more interesting answers can be found simply by going to our investment portfolios. Confronting the true extent to which our investments are benefiting from the depletion of aquifers in China, or the exploitation of laborers in Bangladesh, or the confinement of animals in Iowa. Pollan's reflection about his son prompted me to reflect about my father and my own personal connection to the issues we're here to address today. I grew up in New York suburbs in the 1950s. I hate to admit that. It's okay. There are even older people in this room than I am. I won't name you. I'm tempted. I grew up in the New York suburbs in the 50s, playing on the lawn with my dad's World War II Army gear, his actual Army helmet and spade and canteen and the like. Then I went inside and played in the den of little plastic army men. This was very common in those days. It really was. How many people here had little army men in their garden?
My brother.
No wonder you're all here. It's probably 90% of the people in the U.S. who play with army men are here today. Where am I here? We ate at an early McDonald's where I noticed a sign that read, over 10 million sold. That was in the about 1955, 56. I had an inchoate feeling that there was something funny about putting a number like this on a sign. I remember it, a vague sense that there was something funny about that number. For me, this was the generation of Swanson's TV dinners and The Twilight Zone and Wonder Bread. I don't know why I put The Twilight Zone between Swanson's TV dinners. Oh yes, Wonder Bread. You are looking at a body that was built strong 12 ways. No comments. I can report that Wonder Bread provided many wonderful opportunities for me to load it up with Oscar Mayer bologna and a slather of Hellmann's mayonnaise. By the way, I discovered the other day when I was poking around to do these remarks that in the 1920s, Wonder Bread advertised itself as slow-baked. S-L-O apostrophe. I don't know why they didn't want to do that. That's true, you can check it out. So that was my youth in the New York suburbs in the 50s. Looking back, I can see that it provided many lessons about what Wendell Berry has so rightly called the unsettling of America. Now, here I am, 50 plus years later. McDonald's is on its way to 1 trillion hamburgers. I'm a new resident of Boulder, filled no longer with Wonder Bread and bologna. It didn't say pause there. But rather with displaced affection that has been unable to root itself sufficiently in any one place. I've dug 5 different gardens beside 5 different homes in 5 different towns over the past 25 years. This makes me pretty much an average American statistically in terms of moving around. It also makes me appreciate the importance of place through the process of getting to know new ones, but more deeply through the sense of loss that I experienced each time I picked up and moved. As many of you know by now, sense of place is one of the cornerstones of the slow money principles. The others are care of the commons, carrying capacity, diversity, and nonviolence. Given the events of recent weeks, in particular the bombings in Boston, the explosion of the fertilizer plant in Texas, and the nuclear saber rattling in North Korea, I think we should spend at least a few minutes on the last of these cornerstones, nonviolence. But I'd like us to turn away from the overt violence that is on the front page and focus instead on the inherent violence of our everyday economic activities. This inherent economic violence gets expressed in people and places that are made expendable. It gets expressed in relationships that are subjugated to transactions. Transactions, I was supposed to say. It gets expressed in hundreds of millions of tons of pesticides. It gets expressed in the commercialization and commodification and monetization of every aspect of daily life. After the bombings, a reporter commented, "Events like this affect us after they've left our conscious minds. They linger outside of our conscious attention, but still affect us." So here are a few questions. What is the effect on our conscious attention of being a shareholder? What is the effect on our unconscious minds of absentee ownership? What is the effect on our unconscious doubts of $600 trillion of derivatives? What is the effect on our hearts if the Dow is up 75 points or down 75 points every time we turn on the radio, the TV, or the computer? What is the effect on soil fertility and community health of our money zooming around the planet, prioritizing global economic growth? All of which brings us around to where I was going to start today. Where's my pig? I need my pig. There we are. Feel better now. I was going to start by saying, welcome fellow pig lovers and earthworms.